Hello, hockey world. Today is Friday, March the 7th. Sorry, folks, that was my old job. This is my new job. This is Off the Post. This is the trade deadline show brought to you by a website that will be here next month. That is Hockey Hot Stove. I am Michael Agello, and we are joined by Ted Starkey, who works for Newsday, but also will be doing some columns for hockeyhotstove.com. Dave Reichert, who will be doing Buffalo Sabres content for the website, and Russ Cohen, who's not doing a damn thing except being the host of Off the Post and his website Sportsology and NHLDraftBuzz.com and all
hockey news, all kinds of stuff.
Hockey news. What the hell is he not? Well, I'm hockey news too, but anyway, let's get started here, and we'll start with what I think. Well, it's the second biggest thing. We'll talk about the Rantanen deal in a few minutes because it just officially came down. But I think the one that was unexpected, even though his name has been floated around in trade rumors to every place under the sun, Vancouver, Detroit, Calgary, was Dylan Cousins. And he was moved in a deal within the division to the Ottawa Senators, along with Dennis Gilbert, a Buffalo native who was on a one-year deal, more of an enforcer, physical type. Has been around the league for a while, and a 2026 second-round pick for Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard Docker, right shot defenseman. Russ, I'll go to you first, then I'll go to Dave because I want to get the Buffalo perspective on this. Russ, I'm puzzled by this deal, not because Cousins was traded, because I think we expected him to be traded either before the deadline or over the summer. His name was out there too much. But the thing I have about this deal that I really question, I don't question Josh Norris's talent because I think he has an abundance of it. It's just to display that talent, you have to be on the ice, and he is a chronic injury problem.
Yeah, you do worry about shoulder injuries. I mean, I can go back to when I was a fan and Barry Beck's shoulder would pop in and out on a regular basis. But no, look, Norris definitely has a higher caliber of skill. There's no question. Cousins really has improved on faceoffs, but really we have not seen his offense as a center. If you put him on the wing, you would see his offense. I don't know why the center position seems to take away from it, but he's going to play center there. The thing about Bernard Docker is, like, I watched him live in juniors at a couple different situations, and I thought he was going to be more than what he is. He's at least holding on to an NHL career, but he's been a little disappointing for me. That's not to say he can't be a third pairing guy, but I don't think he's a strong third pairing guy. I think he's okay. But really, Norris could really be big for them. I think, it's funny. I think the expectations for Cousins are even bigger now that he's out of Buffalo, because everybody's blaming the Buffalo culture and everything else, where Norris does have more talent. So it's almost a wash, but I'll give a slight edge to Buffalo, not because of Bernard Docker, though, but because of Norris.
Okay, so Dave, we've watched Cousins over the years. We saw him have that career-high 31-goal season in 2022-23. That was the year the Sabres came within 1 point of making the playoffs. They haven't come close since. I don't think that can be piled on Cousins, but there is a general malaise with this team. And I think, they have not been the offensive juggernaut that they were that season, the last two seasons. And I think it was time for a change of scenery. But what did you think of the deal, first of all?
Well, my concern, you spoke about the health, Mike. I certainly echo that. I think Norris is probably the best player in the deal. But as you said, the key is for him to remain healthy. Right. And also, the other thing that really surprised me about it from the Sabres viewpoint is you're making this trade with Ottawa, a division rival that seemingly you're going to be battling to try to get into the playoffs against in future seasons. So it is a very risky move for Buffalo in my estimation, even though they did in terms of just the talent, as Russ mentioned. They got the best player in the deal. It's just a matter of how many games are they going to have him for?
Now, Ted, I think, I look at this deal, and now you have a 1-2 punch up the middle, even though they've been playing Tage Thompson on the wing recently with Yuri Kulik playing center, and that line has been working. But I assume that Thompson is going to go. They were just keeping Thompson on the wing because it was working. I'm assuming Thompson's going to go back. So you're going to have Thompson and Norris as your 1-2 punch. I mean, I don't think that's bad, but I can't get over the hurdle of, will this guy be in the lineup? He was just out for a month. Mm-hmm. He just came back and played 3 games before the deadline. So, I mean, this is not me just like railing on the fact that he's had injuries. He's continually injured.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, the Sabres for the past dozen years have kind of spun their wheels. They've kind of make a couple steps forward, then things go wrong, step back. Now this year, again, they're going to be contending for the top pick. And it's become a never-ending cycle. And, a trade like this, it helps. It may help on paper a little, but, where's this franchise going? They're not really addressing what they need to take that next step. They kind of nudge towards it and then pull back. And it just, I covered the Sabres a little bit in 2013. They haven't been in the playoffs since I covered them. And so it was just,
it's you. It's your fault.
It must be me. Between the Bills and the Sabres, come on.
They have the same amount of championships. I want to point that out.
They're not AFL. The Sabres.
Yes, the vaunted AFL championship. Yes.
But
they beat Joe Namath.
Right. When Joe Namath was like playing 6 games that year. Okay.
But you just look at this team, and it's like they're never seemingly getting anything right. It's and you look at it today with the trade. It's another first rounder gone. It's 2019 7th overall pick. First round picks are great, but if you keep trading them, they never fit in. How much are they really helping you?
Well, Russ, and we've talked about this before, and this is the issue with the Sabres. The Sabres are Edmonton East. They're a team that has pushed these young guys into the league too early.
Right. Don't
allow them to develop properly. Cousins, I think, was in the league as a 19-year-old, I believe. Yeah. You've had Peterka come in as a 21-year-old, Jack Quinn as a 21-year-old after, I think,
at least Peterka played in Germany with men. So
he played a full season in the AHL. Quinn played like half a season in the AHL, and I think that was the COVID year. So so it was, I don't know how the
COVID year was weird for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know.
It was a bad development year too.
Exactly.
So that was another thing. Yeah, I always look at it like this. Shows put too much emphasis on this guy was a first rounder. Honestly, it has a lot to do with player development, it has a lot to do with the player, and it has to do with them getting rushed as well. And so all those things factor in. So Bernard Docker was a first rounder. Okay, but that's draft plus 5. Forget about it now. Doesn't mean anything. When you tell me Kirby Dach was drafted wherever he was drafted, I still didn't like that trade when it was made in Montreal. Just saying a guy's a first rounder means nothing to me now. It's really about, how they develop and how they were introduced into the league.
Yeah. We welcome Jan Levine to the show. Jan, so give us your thoughts on the Cousins deal, because I look at this trade as risky for Buffalo in the sense of Norris's injury, but more, I think that they needed to throw a hand grenade into the Buffalo locker room. I don't know if it's dysfunctional, but it's not winning. And the game last night, and I don't know whether, a trade of this magnitude was keyed by one moment in the game. And Dave, you know what I'm going to reference because I retweeted it. Rasmus Dahlin was in front of the Tampa net, I believe. No, it was in front of his own net. And 3 or 4 Tampa players like Brandon Hagel were getting in his face and shoving him and pushing him, surrounding him. He was just getting abused. And Dylan Cousins comes in from behind and really doesn't interject in the conversation. And he's allowing the captain of the team to get mauled. And I don't know whether that was the final straw or maybe this deal was already. I would think a deal of this magnitude was already in process, and one little moment like that. But that's sort of a microcosm of what's going. The Tage Thompson incident from earlier in the year. Nobody responded until the next game, and it was Dennis Gilbert, the guy who was just traded, who responded. So, I mean, what did you think of this deal?
So it's interesting. So, I mean, from what you see on social media, from the Ottawa perspective, right, it looked like Brady Tkachuk was pretty emotional in terms of Josh Norris getting dealt, right? And during, and post Four Nations face-off, with all the swirl as to whether or not Brady Tkachuk's going to go elsewhere and whether or not he's going to want to go elsewhere and whether or not he's going to want to stay there, this optics certainly doesn't help the situation for Ottawa in terms of what's going to happen with now. In terms of talent-wise, clearly, I'd much rather have, from a talent perspective, Dylan Cousins than Josh Norris, as much as I like Norris, because honestly, Norris has been injury prone, and that's really the big risk I think that's Buffalo's taking as well in terms of bringing him on board. As you mentioned, part of it might have been just a culture change and needing to change kind of the optics and the visual and everything in the room. So Buffalo may gain there. Ottawa, I think, gets the better player of the two, but clearly the impact of the locker room is going to be something that we're going to have to see whether or not, as you kind of said about tipping over the edge, does this tip it over the edge where Brady decides that he wants to be elsewhere? And if that happens, all the good work that Ottawa's done basically gets kind of torn apart in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Dave, let me ask you, because the Sabres have made other moves today. They're probably going to make one more. I would assume that Henry Jokiharju is going to get traded before the deadline because he's a right-handed defenseman. They're not going to get a lot for him, but I do think that they probably will trade him because I don't think he's re-signing in Buffalo. And they never do, but they could eat salary on his deal to improve the return. But what did you think of the re-signing of Jordan Greenway to a 2-year contract at $4 million and the 2-year extension this morning of Jason Zucker for a little less than I thought? I mean, I thought he was going to get a raise. Sort of the Buffalo tax that Jordan Greenway, that the Sabres paid to sign Greenway, but they signed him at 4.75 for 2 years. What are your thoughts on those two moves and the possibility of Jokiharju being moved?
Well, I think as far as the re-ups with Zucker and Greenway, I think those were good moves for the Sabres. They overpaid a little bit over what market value would be, even when they signed Zucker initially to the 1-year deal, right, for $5 million. But they need players who can perform and who want to be in Buffalo. That's a major issue for this franchise. So 2 individuals that were willing to work with them to stay when they could have chosen to go elsewhere. I think both of those are really good re-ups for Buffalo. As far as Jokiharju is concerned, if he really meant anything significantly to the Sabres, I don't think they would have signed him to just a 1-year deal last year. So right. I think the handwriting was on the wall. It's kind of just bring him in for another year. Maybe they had something else that they were working on last year that might have fallen through, so they went back to him. Yeah. But I think they will move him, and they should to get something back, but it's probably going to be a draft pick deal. I can't see them bringing in more than that for Jokiharju.
Yeah, I was thinking someplace like Florida or Dallas that needs some insurance with Florida needs the right shot, even though they added Seth Jones. Maybe they'll be satisfied with that. I know Dallas with the Heiskanen out, they may want some right side insurance. I know Toronto might be interested, but Buffalo will never trade with Toronto, so that's not going to happen. But there are teams out there that need a right shot defenseman. I think they could make that happen if they want to, and if they don't, then they after he scored 2 goals in a row, they sat him. So it sounds like they wanted to keep him healthy just to make sure they could trade a healthy defenseman. All right, we'll talk about the Rantanen deal in a second, but I want to start with Pete Tessier. Who also will be contributing to hockeyhotstove.com when we go live next month. Pete, the Winnipeg Jets have made a couple moves, and I think a couple good moves. I was talking with somebody who said, yeah, the moves that they made were great, but their offense lately has been sputtering, and they need to add some offense. But what do you think of a 2 and a 4 for Luke Schenn and then a 2 for Brandon Tanev?
I mean, you go back to what you know, right? And the Jets know Tanev. He played there for a number of years. He's someone they can sort of quantify. And the one thing that Tanev is look, he's not very good below his own blue line, but he's fast. And
he's tenacious.
And the Jets ran into the ground last year by Colorado because they played fast. They know that their team, and look, they had Tyler Toffoli on the team. So, I mean, what do you expect is going to happen? But when that happens, you got to learn and recognize there's another gear to the playoffs. The best experience in sports is the first round of the NHL playoffs because it literally looks like a different game. And if you're not set for that, for the pace and the energy it picks up that it goes to, then you won't catch up. And I think adding Tanev is a safe mood, and it plays into Chevy's MO. It really does. Safe, efficient. He got burned last year, spending a little bigger on some things that didn't pan out. He had, in the previous years, he'd spent first round picks. And, only in 2018 did it really move the needle. And there's a bit of a special vibe with that team. And they basically got outgoaled by Fleury. So adding Tanev is good. Adding Schenn isn't a bad thing, too. It's safe, right? I don't think the cost is too high. I mean, the Jets are a team that needs draft capital. I think, depending on what happens with Nick Ehlers in the offseason, they can likely recoup a pick or two lower down the line than what they spent. But they do need draft capital to keep the pipes going in terms of the pipeline going. The other thing is they've got to accept the fact that the reality is Chevy may have been banging on a bunch of doors, had permission to talk to agents and trying to get someone to say to them, do you want to come to Winnipeg? And we know that that's a problem. And, I look out my window right now. There's still snow on the ground. It's going to be plus 8.
You poor guy.
It's here too.
Plus 8 centigrade, the real number. And, on Saturday and the melt's going to begin. But the fact of the matter is a lot of players just don't want to put the time in, but the ones who do tend to be okay with staying. So, that's a reality for them. So given those restraints, and everyone has to remember that they, I don't think this is a bad thing. And I think it plays right into his MO. Safe, affordable, not a lot of draft capital. He's hung on to his first round pick. Doesn't mean he wouldn't spend it, but I think it's going to have to be a very special player for him to spend that pick and anything else.
Yeah. So here's some observations. I mean, I just saw Winnipeg last night, was in their locker room. At least they didn't look slow compared to Philly. So that's a good thing, Pete. They were fast. They're the faster team for that. Their top line is one of the best in the league. It is. And you saw it clicking, and it really clicked on the power play too. But what really struck me with Winnipeg, though, is Mark Scheifele was very guarded with his words and almost couldn't enjoy a win. And I do worry about that as they head into the playoffs, about the pressure of just them just being in their own heads. I saw a little of it in the locker room last night because should have been a game where they were like, okay, we're back on track, whatever. And Scheifele was as guarded as can be. And I was like, that's a little worrisome for me.
And Russ, well, how do you mean by guarded? Because
guarded with his answers, 1-word answers, 2-word answers. They had to pump him to get anything out of him, even though they had a really good game. He had a really good game. He was just, and it was just like, it was like extracting teeth, honestly.
I hate to see him get pumped there, Russ. Sorry. No, but well, I mean, okay. I mean, every team the day before the deadline is guarded. These players don't know. I mean, and Winnipeg is in a position right now where, I mean, conceivably, if they finish, and this is the same for the Atlantic Division, if they finish first in Central, and they avoid that first round match against either Dallas or Colorado, and Dallas and Colorado beat the crap out of each other in the first round, and they play, and who could they play? Calgary, St. Louis, Utah, Vancouver in the first round. I sign up for that And that's a pathway at least to the second round and maybe to the conference final. I mean, I like the position that Winnipeg is in. Now, if I'm Cheveldayoff, Peter, I'm not going all in and trading all my prospects, but this might be your best opportunity. This could be Montreal Expos 1995, where if the strike hadn't happened, they may have won a World Series. 94.
We still talk about it.
94.
Well, I guess Pete, the question is what do you think, if anything, Winnipeg lacks? To me, the big key for me is couplefold. First of all, Ehlers staying healthy, which has been an issue in the past, right? B, if Perfetti continues to play like Perfetti had played, it gives them a really strong second line. And if the growth we've seen from Sandberg continues forward, to me, those are like the three aspects. And getting Tanev and getting Schenn addresses the toughness quotient, which I think we talked about last year, which was a big aspect of what they were needing.
Yeah, Jan, to that point, I think the thing with Schenn is where does he fit in the lineup? And so who is he going to play with and who's going to get bumped out? And I'll be honest, if it knocks Logan Stanley out of the lineup,
that's what should not
that's
happen.
a good thing, right? It should. If it doesn't, I've got some real questions because Logan Stanley is a challenge for the Jets. He gets consistently burned with his skating when he's got to play back inside the blue line, coming backwards. And that's gonna expose him all the time. The other interesting thing is I haven't watched Schenn play much this year, if at all. So I'm not sure where his strengths lie. I know he's sort of bigger, a little more rugged.
Yeah.
But where is he at with moving the puck? And if he can help move the puck,
he's actually not bad, Peter. And I know this from his brief stint in Toronto. I mean, he's a lot better of a puck mover and a lot better of a skater than he was when he was a young player. I think he worked on his skating just to stay in the NHL. But he was pretty good at it, even though he's not the fleetest of foot. I mean, what he's going to bring you is physicality. He is a pain in the ass. He will hit anything that moves and anything that tries to get around him. So, to me, that's like, I know that Toronto was interested in him bringing him back because he's got another year in his contract at, I think it was 2.75, which is a little pricey for him at this state in his career, but he got it. He took the money in Nashville and nobody would blame him to do that. And then Kyle Dubas, I think, made a smart move here, acquiring him from Nashville simply to flip him, and he gets a 2 and 4. It was a pretty good move by Dubas, and that's what he's been doing with a bad old Pittsburgh team. Is accumulating young assets. And Ted, I just want to switch to Ted for a sec. Pittsburgh is not going to be a winner this season in terms of their goals and how things are ending up. But if you look at what Dubas has done, he swaps out Bunting and he gets Thomas, or he gets Philip, he gets Novak, and he gets Schenn, which he flips for 2 draft picks. He gets Tomasino. He trades Marcus Pettersson. I mean, he's trying to on the fly retool that team. I don't know if it's possible to get that team to a place where they can actually be competitive with the ancients there, but he's trying, and I think he has to try because I think that's what ownership is asking him to do, is keep that group in place and try to build around them.
Yeah, I mean, clearly his MO right now is to stockpile draft picks because I think someone said they have like 28 picks or something coming up. So they're basically hoping that they can go into this off season, rebuild a little bit because their farm system isn't great. I mean, obviously the Penguins' issue since 2019 has really been in the net because Tristan Jarry was one of those goaltenders who, on paper, he wasn't bad, but if you watched him in the playoffs, I remember the 2019 series against the Islanders, he was the MVP for the Islanders because he was just letting in ridiculous goals. It wasn't the amount of goals he was allowing, it's just when he was allowing them, what type he was allowing. And, and basically they're right now, they're a 4-guy team, and their defense is slow and not very good, and their goaltending is not able to mop up any mistakes. And, they've demoted Jarry, and now he's back because their other 2 goalies are AHL plus. So really, they got a lot of spots they're going to have to fill to be competitive again. I mean, the East isn't that great this year. But they basically they're trying to work their way back up.
I mean, Mike Sullivan may have given the quote of the deadline because he waxed poetic about Luke Shen, saying what a great guy he is, great character, should have an influence on the young guys. He didn't even get to go out to Dave and Buster's with the young guys. Like, he wasn't in town long enough.
Oh, he could have gone to Buffalo Wild Wings.
So I don't think he thought. My point is, I don't think he thought he was getting flipped. But I had said a couple days ago we were going to see what the Penguins, what their real identity was going to be if they flipped Shen or not. So we know their real identity. They're trying to get younger, but sort of be in the playoffs. And you can't get younger and be in the playoffs in a year and a half. So I do like Novak, though. I actually think getting him with an extra year as a 3C, that's a guy I would even consider extending if he works out there, because he's
got 2 more years.
2 more years. Yeah, he's a pretty good player. So, and he could score a little bit. So that was a good acquisition. I like what Dubas has done.
So okay, let's get to the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to say, just on the flip side of that, I think we're kind of seeing that Barry Trotz as a coach is great, but as a GM, he certainly leaves a lot be desired. Because honestly, I think everybody's reaction when they saw that trade is, what is Nashville thinking and why they're making this trade? Because that's just further evidence of another brutal transaction that he did.
Well, Jan, I mean, I do a podcast for the Hockey News with Emma Lingen, who covers the Predators, right. and I asked her, what was the motivation here for Nashville? And she's like, damned if I know. I mean,
probably not a Trotz guy, Mike. That's what we kept hearing. He traded guys that weren't Trotz guys.
Well,
so that's my guess. And Trotz guys as a coach or Trotz guys as a GM is a whole different ballgame.
Well, I mean, he claimed Jakub Vrana off of waivers from Washington, because he had him in Washington.
Right.
Okay, fine. But Michael Bunting, I don't think he's ever played for Barry Trotz. I mean, he's a feisty guy, and I like Michael Bunting as a player. He's just now been passed.
That's a Trotz guy. He's a feisty guy. That's what Trotz likes.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's bizarre. But anyway, Peter, I'll start with you on the Rantanen deal, because, I mean, the last 72 hours, it became painfully apparent that Rantanen was going to get traded because Carolina wanted to get him on the 8-year deal. He didn't want to stay in Carolina. They were like, we got to get something for him now, because we're not, this proves to me that Carolina doesn't think that they can win the Stanley Cup, because if they thought they could win the Stanley Cup, they would have kept Rantanen. But they traded Neckish and Jack Drury to Colorado to get him, and now they flip him. And as soon as I heard, I think it was Pierre LeBrun last night who said, well, the 3 teams that are in on him are Florida, Dallas, and Vegas. And I'm like, I don't know how Vegas could do it.
There's always a way.
Yeah, I don't. Well, yeah, Vegas. They would just go off and chop off Mark Stone's leg and then reattach it and say you can play in 6 weeks. So they would have probably done something. But the one that made the most sense was Dallas, because they have so many young assets and they have so much empty cap space right now because Heiskanen and Sagan are on LTIR. So, but the thing I didn't expect is they could get Rantanen signed on an 8-year deal. And everybody's saying, $12 million isn't enough. That's what he wanted, more from Colorado. I don't know how many people don't realize the no tax thing in the NHL is a big friggin' deal. And Dallas is one of 6 or 7 teams that have no tax, no state tax. That's a big friggin' deal. So he took $12 million. Probably if he played in Toronto, he'd have to make $14.5 to make as much as he makes by $12 million in Dallas. So they give number 1s to Carolina. What did you think?
And 2 number 3s also, Mike Spoke.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't even hear
Emily
that.
Kaplan reported the additional smaller pieces are 2 number 3s. And the other piece of puzzle, I think somebody saw online, the variant between Colorado and Dallas in terms of the kit per year is about $455,000 a year. What was the kind of the taxable impact, I think.
Yeah. It's one of the other things that the taxing is hard is you can look at the state tax versus versus no state tax, but all these guys are paying taxes out of state too for things. It's a very what do you got, Mike?
1 second. 2 deals. One that happened a few minutes ago. Luke Cunnan going to Columbus. We don't know what.
Yeah.
Pierre LeBrun just reported Charlie Coyle is going to Colorado, and former Sabre first-round pick Dave Casey Middlestat is going to the Bruins.
Wow.
So after signing a 5-year deal after he gets traded for Bowen Byram last year, they soured on him in less than 3/4 of a season and flipped him to the Bruins for Charlie Coyle.
Rightfully so. He's been brutal there. He's been brutal in Colorado.
Wow. I mean, all right. While Peter's talking to somebody, Dave, we saw Middlestat. He was basically a third line center, and then they moved him up to 2C, and he had a bunch of assists. But last year, they had Thompson and they had Cousins sign long-term, making over $7 million. And everybody was saying they're going to trade Middlestat because Middlestat's going to expect to get paid close to what they got. And the Sabres had no interest in paying him. And that's why they flipped him for Byram. And now he gets flipped again within a year. I think actually today is the exact 1 year anniversary. It might be.
I think it is. I think it is within a day, Mike.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just how quickly it went south for Middlestat in Colorado. I mean, it looked like such a good move for Colorado when he first went there. And then they clearly wanted to move away from him. And Buffalo, I guess getting Byram out of that deal now looks even better for Buffalo, the initial deal.
I mean, Russ, because we've talked about Middlestat. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good playmaker. I don't think he ever turned out to be the player that Buffalo expected. And I remember, again, here's another example of Buffalo rushing their players. I think it was a sophomore year at Minnesota, and he played great. Yep. And they signed him, and he had like 6 points in seven games at the end of the season, and they said he's ready. And then the Ryan O'Reilly comments happened, and they traded Ryan O'Reilly. And I think one of the reasons they traded him is that, well, we can plug in Middlestat as our second line center, and he wasn't ready. And I think they stunted his growth. Now, eventually he turned
into – No, they did. But, yeah, listen, I still think he could play. This isn't about what he can't do. This is about – look, Colorado has some smaller guys, and they have Drouin and whatever, and they expect to go far in the playoffs. So they traded for size. That's what they did. They wanted Coyle. Coyle's bigger. He's tougher, and they probably feel like that's better now for their cup run than what Middlestat could give them. I don't think this is an indication that Middlestat can't play or they were unhappy with him. I think this is just them retooling the roster, looking at how the playoffs are played. That's what I think.
And apparently there's more than just Middlestat in this deal going to Boston. So
it's good for Boston. I mean, they needed to start to get younger. I mean, I'll just add this. For all the talk about Brad Marchand, I'd be a little worried about getting him. His play has dropped off significantly.
He's hurt. I know. They don't even know how long he's going to be out. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, of course, like, either TSN or Sportsnet put out, well, could Brad Marchand be traded to Toronto? It's like, I said, that's like Claude Lemieux getting traded to the Red Wings. I mean, come on.
You'd love it, and you'd love it.
I think I screwed up the joke. I think I said Claude Lemieux getting traded to the Avalanche. He's already on the Avalanche.
I was going to say.
Yeah,
a little bit busy at the moment.
I had 6 things going on at once, Anthony. So excuse me.
Come on, multitask, Michael.
When you sit in the big chair, Mike, you got to be able to do that.
Well, Anthony's sitting in the driver's seat here. There you go.
Literally in this case.
But let's get back to Peter because we had the breaking news of the deal, and we'll see what the particulars were in a minute. But you look at the picture right now in the Central, Peter. Dallas has now got Rantanen. They've got him locked up long term, 8 years at $12 million. I mean, that would make you think that, and I think Jamie Benn is up after this year, that either Jamie Benn's coming back at a veteran minimum, or they're just going to walk away from him because I don't know how they fit him. But now you've got Rantanen added to, and Heiskanen will be back before the playoffs, and they added CC and Granlund. So they're in a nice position. And Colorado now has added Charlie Coyle and Brock Nelson for the playoffs.
Mike, can I add this? Will Zellers is a scorer. The fact that the Bruins got him in this deal makes it even better.
Okay, you have the particulars on that? Because I just saw
they just said it in the chat room. Cloutier mentioned it, and a 3rd-round pick. So I think Boston did really well on that trade. They did.
Yeah, but Peter, I mean, looking at the outlook for the Central Division in the playoffs, I mean, Winnipeg is loaded up, Dallas is loaded up, Colorado is loaded up. You could have your opinion on who is loaded up the best, but Rantanen is the best player of that group.
Yeah, he is. But Brandon wasn't lighting it up in Carolina.
No.
And now, his third team in 2 months or whatever it is. So, he's got 20 games here, 19 games now, or no, 20 games to Dallas, to sort of figure out and what happens. I'm not a big believer in teams that load up at the deadline and start handing out 8-year contracts at $12 million is a strategy. So I think that's just, I'm risk adverse that way. I appreciate what it looks like. It's a very calculated move, but the one thing is it's going to draw interest. It's going to say things to other players and things about that. And there's also this message too, is, are you serious? And, Vegas always looks serious. Colorado looks serious. Dallas looks serious. If you're the Jets, do you look serious or do you look cautious? And does that cautiousness permeate into things that Russ just said, where you've got a player who's sort of giving one-word answers, not, the whole thing about the trade deadline. You're hoping that your GM says, yeah, I support you guys and go forward. That has an effect on people. The mental aspect of what this all does has a thing. And if your GM sits on his hand and says, well, I tried and nothing happens. Well, you didn't try. What you're supposed to do. And, right now, a team like the Jets with the best goalie in the world, a lethal power play should be an attraction point for players to come and say, yeah, I would give this a shot for a playoff run that I might not see elsewise. And that should be a selling point. And that's the GM's job to make it that way. So, for Dallas, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. And I think, for the Jets to avoid problems like finishing on top is going to be a huge thing for them. Dallas has a game in hand, is 6 points back right now. So this last 20 games is going to be a big race between those clubs, because coming out number one in the West is going to be a massive advantage for whoever gets there, at least in the first round. Because I'm happy to watch Dallas and Colorado beat the snot out of each other first round.
No,
very happy.
And whoever wins the Atlantic is going to have the same approach to the 2-3 corridor of hell, as I call it. If it's Florida and Tampa, Toronto will be sitting back, eating popcorn, watching them beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
And that's to their advantage. Now, then Toronto has got to win a first round match, for crying out loud. But, first things first. But, that's to their advantage. And it's the same thing with the Jets. If the Dallas and Colorado, go 7 games and just destroy each other, and then so much the better for them. I think Dallas benefited from that last year. They played who was it in first round? Vegas. Didn't they play Vegas? And that wasn't an easy out, but they had the wild card, and then it was Colorado and Winnipeg in the first round, and that wasn't a long series, but it was still that was a tough matchup for either one of them, I think. And then they ended up facing Colorado in the second round, but.
This doesn't guarantee. I just want to say, I don't care what the
nothing
odds
guarantees
are.
anything.
I don't care what the odds are for the Cup.
Yeah.
I still look at Dallas and say, I don't know. There's still some blue line issues there. There's definitely the issue of the first round matchup. And if they don't get to the Cup this year, and even though this is a good signing, it's not like you can say Rantanen's a bad signing. They could still look like the Sharks of yesteryear. With all these moves and all the expectations and just not coming through. That would be my worry if I was a fan of the Dallas Stars.
Well, they inherited Joe Pavelski from the Sharks, so maybe he brought that, get
vibe
so far and no further. But, the thing is, it's like you have to say, we've got Team Finland East and Team Finland West. And Team Finland East is the Panthers with Barkov and Mikkola, and there's a couple others there. Luosterainen, and now you've got the Stars with Roope Hintz, Rantanen, Heiskanen, Granlund. I mean, it's just put Stars, put Swami on there. It's like, you may as well.
Well, the interesting thing to me too is you look at the Metro. I mean, it's a good day for Washington and the Rangers, because it's hard to say. Carolina got a good deal for the future, but not necessarily. Do I take them seriously as a Cup contender? The Devils obviously lost Hughes. Siegenthaler will be out. The Rangers are probably the second best team in the Metro right now.
No, I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, they're only a couple points. They're probably.
I know a couple points and still far away though. Like I'm not. I
Russ
wouldn't be willing to say that.
Russ has soured on the Rangers this year.
Well, because I see the mix of players. They're changing the way they play, and that's fine for next year. But when you do that midstream, it's hard to put it all together.
But Colorado has exposed themselves for the team that they are and the organization that they are. Okay, so maybe they knew they offered as much as they could to Rantanen, and he just wasn't going to sign. Okay, so that's the reality. They got burned last year by Jake Gensel, but from all the reports, Gensel had given them a number. They didn't want to meet it. And then at the 11th hour, like on June 30th, before he went to free agencies, they said, oh, we'll give you that. And he's like, screw you. I'm going to go where I want now. And then he went to Tampa. So they played these chicken crap games.
But they do this every time, Mike. They haven't signed one guy to one of these contracts yet when they've brought them over to get more offense. They haven't.
Right. They signed Svechnikov, but they didn't give him top dollar. They had to be forced into an offer sheet to sign Sebastian Aho. So, they signed Slavin, but Slavin took what I think was a hometown discount. They let Pesci and Shea walk. I mean, Ted, to me, I know that I think they've maintained a level of quality because of Rod Brindamore, but I think that their management and their ownership has screwed them out of having better opportunities to win long term.
I mean, they've been a very good team goaltending out. Just the goaltending has always been a little bit suspect. Obviously, this year, like I said, I didn't quite. I think you make the trade with Colorado for them was a home run deal, and then you kind of throw it back because you realize you're not going to sign the guy. And people got to realize this summer and the next couple summers, every team is going to have ample cap room. So there's going to be some really, really bad contracts signed on July 1st, just because teams are going to have an extra $10 million. They're going to throw it around, and I think that's obviously what was the goal because he thought, oh, this summer I can make 14 with a team like Carolina because that's going to take a comparable amount of cap room as the current situation. But yeah, Carolina to me, it just they just never got the goaltending right. They kept trying to change it. The defense is decent, but not their team built for October, which is great for baseball and lousy for hockey. They'll outscore you, they'll beat you 6-5, but when it comes to April, you're trying to face a goaltender who's hot. They have real issues.
Okay, this is a strange one. The Red Wings just tweeted out, we have completed a deal. The Red Wings have traded Joe Veleno to the Blackhawks for Craig Smith and Peter Mrazek.
Oh, wow. Listen, Veleno.
I call that a deck chairs trade.
Well, first of all, Peter Mrazek returns home because
Right.
we know he started his career there. So life is a circle.
They get some veteran help. I mean, Veleno's really struggled though as an NHLer. I had high hopes for him once. I may be wrong about him.
Yeah, I mean, I get it from the Blackhawks point of view because I think they're going to give Veleno probably second, third line, opportunity. Now, does this mean that they're going to trade Ryan Donato? I mean, because they supposedly
he's got 26 goals. They're not trading him.
Russ, they've been negotiating to try to sign him to an extension, and the talk is that if they can't get him on an extension, they're going to trade him.
Yeah, I would be surprised. I mean, he's been really good for them.
He's been really good for him. I agree, but I think that maybe if he scores 35 goals, he ends up with 35 goals, and he's a UFA at age I think 26.
Yeah, that would
he's
be a
going
hot commodity.
He's going to and I mean they have the cap space to re-sign him. They got a ton of cap space, but still, that's a little bit of a puzzling one. All right. We haven't touched on it, Anthony. So we'll go. Unless we want to wait until you're at the home base.
We're good. Let's talk. We're good.
Okay, so the Maple Leafs made what I think will be one of two moves. Mm-hmm. They haven't made the second one yet. They did make the move for the center. And I think you looked at the way everything broke. Anthony, I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning because my phone was buzzing, and Brock Nelson gets traded at 2:30 in the morning to the Avalanche, and Yanni Gourde gets traded to Tampa along with Bjorkstrand. And in both those deals, a first-round pick was involved. So at that point, short of the Leafs going after a guy like Luke Cunnin, who got traded to Columbus, and I don't know what they traded for him, but I think it'd probably be like a second-round pick. I came to the realization that, for them to get any center that was going to make any difference, they're going to have to give up the one. But where I stepped off was, if they give up a one and one of their top prospects, then I thought Brad Treliving should be put in a padded room with one of those straitjackets. The deal ended up being, I think, for where we are right now and the price that's being paid for centers, it was for centers with, and I'm saying this gently, limited talent. I don't think Gourde is a grand slam home run type guy. Brock Nelson's 33 years old. He used to be really good. He's not that great anymore. Lawton is a 15 goal scorer who can penalty kill, and he brings a physical edge. They're not worth the packages that they're getting, but the market is there, and that's what you're going to
seller's market. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So the trade ended up being a protected number one, and the protection is only top 10. And I don't think the Leafs are going to fall into the top 10 next year, but who knows? So a top 10 protected first round pick, and Nikita Grabyankin, who I like as a player. He is one. I compare him. He's a younger Ivan Barbashev type. He's a motor that doesn't quit, physical. He's a good interview. He's a Russian kid. He played pretty reasonably in the American Hockey League. So they gave up the first and Grabyankin, and they got back Lawton at 50% at $1.5 million plus a couple lower round picks. Anthony, I take the Philadelphia perspective first, but I think Toronto, for the way the market was, they did as good as they could do.
I think it was a fair trade. Again, we knew before the name Fraser Mitten had been thrown around a lot. Again, certainly 1-for-1, that trade was not going to happen. You have to include other things for Mitten to have been involved. But I think, again, Philadelphia, if you take a look at where Philadelphia's lineup is, they're a smallish lineup at the end of the day. Grabyankin is 6'2", 209.
Yeah.
Can play either, pretty much listed at either wing. Some offensive talent there. I mean, Mike, you know that as well.
Yeah,
so
he scored in the KHL. He did really well in the KHL.
Scored in the K, and we'll see how he does, obviously, as he continues to transition. I'd expect him to be, heading to the Phantoms in short order, and then potentially next season, getting into training camp. The first-round pick I held to, and you and I, we all had this discussion. We kept saying first-round pick was crazy. I said, if we're talking 2027, it's not crazy. I think in that circumstance, a 2026 was something that was probably going to be a tall order for Danny Briere to pull off. So I think based off of the way this deal kind of went down, it was kind of this was about the return that I expected if it was going to be primarily Lawton and not another player also being attached to the deal. Well, and I think the trade value is fair for Philly going forward because, again, it's something that they needed. They needed for the long term in terms of having a sizable, closer to power winger type of player. And again, I think your Barbashev comment is a valid one. It kind of reminds me a little bit of him. And again, Philly's just trying to find potential offensive talent in the coming years. And this was probably, again, as good a value as they were going to get for Scott Lawton. I felt this deadline, if you have multiple teams really bidding on him, you had to strike now in making the move. That I didn't think they were going to get the same. I honestly didn't believe they were going to in the off season or at the draft. I didn't think they were going to be able to necessarily court the same level of desperation from teams to potentially make an overpay. So this was the time to do it. And again, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair trade for Philly, and I think it's a very good acquisition for Toronto.
Russ, I want your thoughts on the deal. But Elliot Friedman just tweeted out Cody Glass going from Pittsburgh to New Jersey.
Yeah, that's not a Jack Hughes replacement.
That's not a Jack replacement. Yeah. Well, again, the center. Now, you know what? I'm actually surprised if Middlestat was on, and maybe they wouldn't do that because Middlestat had so much term left.
That's right.
But there are not many rental centers other than Donato out there. So
yeah.
And I'm assuming it's a draft pick coming back. But I mean, I'll say this. I think the main reason that the first ended up being part of this, also, the escalating prices were one thing, but the retention was the other. And getting Lawton at 1.5 enables Toronto to maybe do something in the next 40 minutes before the deadline to maybe add a defenseman. But what do you think of the whole deal there, Russ?
Yeah, I think Briere did well. I think he did wait. There was no question he waited as long as he could. He had Toronto on the hook clearly. And yeah, I think Treliving did well by not giving up his top prospects.
Right.
And like Anthony said, we didn't really expect that. We had chatted about that. Anthony and I sitting near each other. We had chatted about that a while. Again, I don't know this prospect, so I don't know what he'll do when he comes to North America. We'll see. But the first
no, he's in North America.
Oh, yes, okay.
He's already on the Marlies.
Oh, he's on the Marlies. Okay.
21 points with the Marlies.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll see what he looks like.
He had a great year playing for, I think it was Akbars and they won the cage. He was with Magnitogorsk.
Right.
And they won the Gagarin Cup. And then he came over and he's played for the Marlies, and I think he played 5 or 6 games with the Leafs. And he almost made a case for, well, it's easy to make a case for playing on the fourth line when you have that useless hunk of
Ryan
flesh,
Reeves,
Ryan Reeves on the fourth line. But he was an Energizer bunny. He was a guy who was hitting everything that moved.
Yeah, so, I don't know the player, but I think otherwise, taking the player out of it, I think it still was a good deal, and it was good for both. There's no question. I think the only thing is when you start listening to the reports on Canadian TV and they talk about they're making Lawton into a little more than he is too, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, that's the Leaf effect. I mean, they have to pump it up. But Ted, you were talking about New Jersey in the chat here. I mean, you lose Jack Hughes and you lose Dougie Hamilton, so you lose your top center and you lose your number one defenseman, and you replace Hughes with, or you replace Dougie Hamilton with Brian Dumoulin, and you replace Hughes with Cody Glass. It's not exactly, seamless transition.
No, and the other thing too is Siegenthaler might be out for a while, so you're really hurting on defense. And you look at the Devils. I mean, they had a great start to the season, but as the season wore on, they kind of are playing less and less. We were talking with Carolina. New Jersey's a bit the same way. Very offensively up tempo. That doesn't translate well as you get later in the season. And now you're looking at a position that a team could end up passing them for third in the Metro, puts them in the wild card. That really puts them in a precarious position for the playoffs because there's a whole bunch of teams. It's not necessarily a bunch of great teams, but just you can't finish 500 and expect to make the playoffs. It's just by the law of averages, a couple teams are going to pass you. You have to be good down the stretch. And I'm not really sure New Jersey. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we'll have Matthew Blittner on later, who covers New Jersey. He's for the whole season for my site, Sportsology. So he'll be able to give some good insight on this. But from what I've gleaned from him and everything else, it seems like they're becoming like a defense first team now, especially losing Hughes. But Herman Trapp is a good player, and I got to tell you, Anaheim didn't just pluck him for no reason. Like, they watched him at the World Juniors. They saw what I saw, and Anaheim is smart, man. Like, that's one where if I'm the Devils fans, Dumoulin looks good today, and he might look good, for this season. But watch that trade, because I'm not saying he's a superstar or anything, but he's a guy with size and good hands, and that's something Anaheim can do something with. So I think that's pretty interesting too.
So the full trade, the Bruins trade with Colorado, was Casey Middlestat, William Zellers, and a 2025 second-round pick from Colorado for Charlie Coyle, who I believe is a rental.
Yeah, that's a great trade. I have to
tell you. 2026 fifth-round pick. I mean, I mean, okay, it sounds like they gave them the second round pick to take 4 years of Middlestat off their hands.
Well, yeah,
Right.
but they got Zellers too. I'm telling you, Zellers comes from Shattuck. This kid can score. I've watched him for like 3 years. He's a little undersized, but not tremendously undersized. And you never know what's going to happen in like 3 years with that kid.
Dave, it's going to be interesting now with these games within the Atlantic Division, with Dylan Cousins with Ottawa coming into the KeyBank Center, and now Casey Middlestat with Boston, and Sam Reinhart with Florida. It's like you're going to be all you need now is Jack Eichel to be traded to Toronto, and it's just it's going to be all the Hall of Horrors, like coming back to haunt you.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Mike, they're in a position where they weren't really contending even as long as they were last year. The Sabres had a stretch where they were within a few points, even later in the season of making the playoff. Right. And now Vegas is coming in, next Saturday, and then you've got these divisional games. So it should be, the fan base should be fired up with these games coming up against these teams.
So fired up, they'll be waving palm trees in front of the press box, and we've got a group of like 7 fans like right next to the press box that leads the Fire Adams chant. It's like,
Mike, we should talk about the Nelson trade. That was an interesting trade. Yeah, I'll tell you what was interesting about the Nelson trade. Again, I talked about it in other shows. I got to know Shannon Hogan a little bit. She played in our charity softball event. She's a great person, but she did a great interview with Nelson. And when Nelson was post-game there crying, and she was practically crying, I knew he was getting traded. I knew at that point Lou had finally succumbed to that. But he didn't succumb to Kyle Palmieri, and he signed him, which we'll get to another day. But as far as Callum Ritchie goes, I think there's some provincial bias with him in certain rankings, but I like him a lot. And I do think he's kind of like got a lot of attributes that Nelson does, except I think he probably about the same skater. Nelson, I think, has a better shot. This guy's a better playmaker. This guy's a really smart player. He does score a lot down low, and he's a center. So I think that's about as well as you could do for a prospect that's really close to the NHL. For Nelson, who's, and I don't want to, I think you were kind of over dramatized, like he's not on the other side where he's not effective. He's still an effective player.
He's just not what he was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years ago, Brock Nelson was definitely better, no question. Yeah. But I think the Islanders did really well on this trade. I do, because Ritchie, could end up being a second-line center. Worst case scenario, he's a third-line center, but he could be a second-line center for them. So that's good. The Kyle Palmieri thing, it's just like the same as why they kept re-signing Matt Martin. It's like, why are you re-signing Kyle Palmieri? He's a good guy. I get it. He's from the island. I get all those things. I just don't get why they're going in that direction rather than trying to get younger.
I mean, if you're getting them for pennies on the dollar, fine. But yeah, I mean, Ted, the Islanders befuddle me because they've had the same problem since they made the conference final 2 years in a row, and everybody sees it except Lou. And what he does is he corners himself by signing like Pierre Engvall to a 7-year deal for $3 million a year, and Mayfield, even though I think Mayfield's a good defenseman, but signing him to this long-term deal, and then he's gonna like pinch pennies about Noah Dobson, who's his best defenseman. I don't get where they go. I don't get what they're doing.
And the thing is, the Islanders, their farm system's absolutely awful right now. I mean, the Bridgeport's the last place in the American Hockey League. Probably their top prospect is Cole Eiserman before the trade. And he may or may not. I mean, I've seen him a couple times. He may be a year away. I would not rush him in. But
I think he's 2 years away. I think they would be making the same mistake as Wallstrom if they think he's a year away.
They're already comparing him to Mike Bossy, which is going to be a huge
no, mistake. Stop. He's not Mike Bossy.
I like Eiserman. He's a good kid, but don't put the pressure on this kid.
Nobody was Mike Bossy. Let's be real. Come on.
Yeah, it's like Miroslav Inicek.
I know. I just want to tell people, like, growing up a Ranger fan, I used to wake up living on Long Island, opening up Newsday, and just to see how many goals Mike Bossy scored every game. I mean, that's really,
he's it's not 50 every year.
Right.
Every year.
It's not going to be like that for Eiserman, but he could score 35.
Yeah, you can't tag him coming into the league like that because I mean, especially look at this year. Their big offseason acquisition was Duclair, who was a healthy scratch earlier this week. They're just the problem is they kind of deluded themselves into thinking they were a top 4 team when, to be honest, they got some breaks in the 20 and 21 playoffs. They got, some good matches and some good results outside their own bracket. And then they just kind of continually kind of degraded. In the last year, I mean, they made the playoffs, but that's because the East was not very good. They got 95 points, but probably in a normal year, they wouldn't have made it. This year, they never really got going. I think Sorokin is just overloaded. I think, there's too much.
There's not that. I mean, the defense at times was awful in front of him.
Oh yeah, and they have too many puck movers and not any actual defensemen. I mean, hell, they got Tony DeAngelo at the KHL. That shows how many teams in the NHL get guys from the KHL and replacements. Come on.
And that's the hilarious thing. Other thing, Ted, is that 2-3 years ago they were a team that played shutdown defense, and Sorokin was a Vezina Trophy candidate, and now they're exposing him and letting him get just rolled over sometimes. I don't get where that organization is going, and I have too much respect for Luda to really rip on him, but clearly, some of the decisions that they've made have just been baffling. And then they lose Barzal, and then they lose 1 or 2 players. They're just not good enough.
No, and they overpay their middle, the bottom 6. And we're talking about Palmieri. They're basically bidding against themselves, because I don't know what other team's really going to pay a lot for Palmieri. Obviously Lou was, he said, I've heard the reports it's going to be less than his current contract is $5 million. I mean, come on. This is a guy that maybe would get interest from a handful of teams. And you're paying him $5 million, so you can't sign to improve the rest of your team.
That's the standard with him, though. With Lou Pajot, $5 million. Everybody makes $5 million. It's like,
I think at one time, with a cap, I think it was at 81. He had the most players earning $5 million or more than any team in the NHL. Now it wasn't because I think the top player at that point it may have been Barzal, it may have been Anders Lee. But it was like 7 or 8 forwards making $5 million or more.
Yeah, no, it's just that he wants to keep the band together, and at some point, the game's passed him by. They're not fast. They're dependent on their goalie. If it wasn't for Sorokin, they'd be down with Buffalo.
He's keeping the band together, but it's the friggin' Rolling Stones. They're a bunch of geriatrics. Russ, you'll be interested. The Rangers have extended Urho Vakanainen on a 2-year deal at a 1.55 AAV for 2 years.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, he's been okay. He's an okay NHL defenseman. That's what he is.
Yeah. Now,
I had greater hopes for him 4 or 5 years ago, and so at least he's an NHLer, and that's good.
I'll bring this up when Jan comes back, but I was again. It's like those videos where the dog just goes, looks at somebody like with their head tipped one way. The Carson Soucy deal with the Rangers, I'm like, huh? I don't. Again, with them, they just seem to be like all over the place. What they're doing.
The Soucy thing. Look, all right. So Chris Drury has decided to trade talent for truculence and toughness, because Carson Soucy is not a great skater. Like, we know this now. If you plan on being a playoff team, yes, he could be a good guy in the playoffs, but you have to get to the playoffs, and I don't think they're getting to the playoffs. So, again, I think their defense, the way that it's currently constructed, is like a mix. And I think you've got some really good puck movers. You have some offense, but I think there's a lot of average NHL defensemen on that blue line now. Schneider is now head and shoulders above some of these other guys, Mike. That's the funny thing here, but he's going to have to be able to do that now every year. So, they're going to trade Chris Kreider over the summer too. We can't forget that.
And maybe Zibanejad.
No, Zibanejad, I think the contract's going to keep him there.
Elliot Friedman just reported, Dallas, Jim Nill was earning his salary today. The Dallas Stars have extended Wyatt Johnston on a 5-year deal at $8.4 million.
Wow.
Based off of this year, this is not a great contract. I'm sorry.
But again, this tells me that Jamie Benn is either taking veteran minimum to stay or he's
sure, but
yeah,
you're banking on why. Okay, again, this is the problem with the whole 2020 draft. You don't know what these guys were going to be, so they got a great pick out of it in Johnston. He killed it last year. He has not killed it this year. So now you're paying $8 million, which, okay, $8 million used to be $6 million with inflation and the cap going up. So I don't know. I don't know if he's worth that. I'm going to just go on the limb and say he's probably not.
Well, he's actually having a better year than I thought he was. I mean, he's not, he's 62 games. He's got 23 goals, 36 assists for 59 points. Last year he had 65 points, so he's going to beat that, and he's still got 20 games. So he's going to score 75 points, Russ.
Maybe. Yeah.
Now, the thing
$8 million bucks, I mean, okay.
But every 10 points is $1 million, right?
I guess that's what it is. I just watched his year kind of go like that. He does have more points than I thought, but I don't know. That's a lot of money for him.
Now, let's go around the horn here because I swear, and maybe it was because they're both centered in Toronto, but I saw online and I saw little snippets of the TSN broadcast and the Sportsnet broadcast that said once that Rantanen signed the deal at $12 million AAV for 8 years, and remember again, it's a no tax state, so that $12 million someplace else would be significantly higher, but some teams don't look at it that way. But the first name that was out of their mouth, Peter, was Mitch Marner. And they were saying, how does this affect Mitch Marner? And I went online and said, doesn't. Mitch Marner will ask for $1 more than Austin Matthews, and Brad Treliving will tell him to go fuck himself.
Ooh. I don't think Brad will say it that way.
No, I think he will, because Austin Matthews.
Now you sound like Cody Rhodes, Mike. I don't know what's going on here.
I don't know. I don't watch WWE anymore.
Well, he said the same thing to The Rock. Anyhow, go ahead.
Oh, did he? Okay, go ahead. Wow. Okay, there you go. But okay, and I'm not. Yeah, Marner's having a great year, but Austin Matthews is the highest paid player on that team, and the cap going up is not going to change that. And that's the thing. I don't think they're going to pay Mitch Marner. Will they pay him $12 million? Sure, but $12 million in Toronto is not $12 million in Dallas, and that's
okay. But you can't. That's an uncontrolled variable. You can't affect that, Mike.
Sure.
That comparing where you're going to pay $12 million is a problem for every team in the league. So don't worry about it. The issue, and this is, and let's be really honest, Mitch Marner's making up that difference with his sandwiches or whatever the heck they are with Skip the Dishes. He's
I don't even know what you're talking about, Pete. Please explain.
He has an ad. He does advertisement, and he also does
here's the thing that no one really talks about.
He does sports interaction commercials too.
Here's the thing that no one really talks about when you're a star player or even a not star player with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're getting handed everything in the GTA. I used to have a client whose son was a very well-known Maple Leaf. And in fact, I did some work for his son at one point. This guy was a thug. I'm going to keep saying it until you get. And he was born and raised in Winnipeg. He was a thug. He played in the States for a bit, and his wife was an Albanian model. Any guesses?
I'm not guessing.
I'm not guessing.
Come on, Mike. You got to do this. No. Ty Domi played in Winnipeg.
I know.
But he was a thug, and he was making more in deals outside of his NHL contract in the GTA than he was in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was a thug. Come on, Mike. It was Colton Orr.
Colton Orr.
And Colton Orr. And Colton did very well for himself outside of his, he got his last deal. I can't remember who signed that one. I think it was a Burke Nonis deal.
Believe me, built his rep up with the Rangers, though.
Believe me, there are people in Toronto who wish that he would beat the crap out of George Peros again.
Well, yeah, exactly. So here's the thing about that stuff. Mitch Marner if he stays in Toronto, he's going to make a boatload of money on other ways. Like
Sure.
they're getting free cars. It's insane what they get.
The mayor of Toronto visited.
It's nuts.
Canadian
Any issue with the Leafs is simply put is signing Mitch Marner at just under what Austin Matthews going to move us in the direction of getting past the second round. That is the only question that Brendan Shanahan and Treliving and whoever owns the bloody team anymore, Rogers and TSN and Bell and whoever, and who's the other guy in there? He's still got like a 5%.
Larry Tannenbaum.
That is the only thing that they need to think about.
Well,
is
all right, but
loading up on those contracts, going to move them in the right direction. Because if they don't, they've got cap room, they've got ability, and they've got things they can do. And I don't think they're going to say they have more cap room and they keep Marner at a reasonable rate. Is bringing someone else in with the same core and the same problems without addressing anything going to move the needle for them? No. So the risk factor for them is you sign Marner to another 5-year deal at $13 million or whatever it is, and you never move the needle. What does that do? That just means you're out of a job.
So Shanahan could be out of a job at any moment.
Shanahan, if they lose in the first round, Shanahan will be out of a job.
Right. But getting past that, Pete, if it were this easy, and I agree with a lot of the things you said, they would have signed Marner already. Like, it would have just been done already. Like, there's other factors here. There are other factors.
Russ, that's Darren Ferris. Darren Ferris, they tried to get a deal done last summer. They said, if we can't get a deal done, we would like to explore possibly trading him. He said, I have no place I want to play other than Toronto next year.
Right, but what did they offer him?
Well, we don't know, but
that's the thing. So if the
rumor
is a number,
the rumor is that they offered him the same deal that Nylander was offered, 11.5.
Right. So that's not what he wants. He wants at least 12, like Pete said. So that's not $500,000 over all those years is still a lot of money. And I think that's the whole thing. Obviously, there's a reason the Leafs don't want to give him 12 then. So I think Pete's right. They're waiting to see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Ted, what are your thoughts on Marner and all the little talk that came out of it?
I mean, I think, like I alluded to earlier, I think with the cap going up, I mean, it's going to go up 19% the next 3 years. So I think you're just going to see a reset in pretty much across the board of what all players are making. And, I'm sure the thing Rantanen was thinking was basically, let's kind of see how we would compare to what we're going to get in a couple months. And, I'm sure with the UFA class coming out, he's going to be getting lots of offers, lots of teams offering stupid money. And at worst case, you're going to force Toronto to have to try to match some of those. Obviously other teams can only give him 7 years, but he's probably going to approach 14 or 15, at least in some of the offers, just because teams are going to want to make a splash. Teams want to spend to the cap, and teams usually spend stupid money. So I think, I think the very worst is going to try to force Toronto to match what he wants.
Right. I wrote a piece for the Hockey News a few months back that it calculated all the, and sometimes you can overemphasize the whole tax thing, but in Toronto, they were like the second or third worst in terms of tax. I think it was Montreal was worst, and I think maybe New York was second, but Toronto was third. And go ahead.
I was going to say, you look at it, it's like it's becoming like the late 90s for the NHL too, because with all the the border stuff, the Canadian dollar,
the tariff stuff. The tariff stuff. It's 23. We talked about it the other day, Ted. It's 25%, of the league revenue is the Canadian teams. And I said what could happen. I don't think these tariffs are going to last, but we'll just play along and say they will. If they last, I think there's going to be some Canadian teams, not the Leafs, that aren't going to spend to the cap to make up the difference what they're losing on playing players in U.S. funds. I think that could happen.
They won't last. It's a negotiating ploy. It's going to be over in 5 weeks or something like that. But this is the thing. Everything will depend on how they do in the playoffs. If they advance, now not to say that they will pay Marner anything. I think that the line of demarcation is Matthews' contract, but I think Pierre LeBrun reported a few months ago that Marner, the last offer that the Leafs made to Marner was 13. That they would not go past. It was either 12 or 13. But I did a piece for the Hockey News, calculating what he would get on a 7-year deal from teams that were rumored to be interested in him. One was Utah, one was Nashville, Vegas. I don't think can do it anymore with all
He
the
wouldn't
other.
go to Nashville now. No way.
Well, maybe not, Russ, because who knows? But say Utah. I mean,
Utah's possible.
He could make more money on a 7-year deal, making 12 than in Utah than he could on an 8-year making 12 in Toronto. So I mean, the tax implication was so much that he would have to get overpaid in Toronto, and I don't think Toronto's going to do that. So, but everything will depend on how they do in the playoffs.
Here's a scenario I'm wanting to see, and you guys could comment on this. I want to see the Leafs go like past the first round, maybe go to the second round, let Marner score the game-winning goal, and have Austin Matthews come out at the end and say, "It's okay if Mitch Marner makes more money than me. It's fine. I don't mind." Russ, I want to see that because then Mike will go.
It's not up to him.
But
he's
can say
not
that, Mike,
a
and it would
friggin'
help
owner.
Negotiations. It doesn't matter if he says that. No, what matters is you are probably right in the sense that they don't want to go over the Matthews contract. But if Matthews says go ahead, I don't care.
Well,
and I've seen players do this. No, but I've seen players do this in other sports.
I know, because that's his buddy, Russ. But It's not up to him.
Again, it would put pressure on them to do it,
which is why Matthews won't do it, Russ. That's why.
We'll see. Probably not.
Yeah, I know you like rub your hands with glee that
Absolutely, I'd rub my hands with glee. I would like to see that situation occur. It would be fun.
Yeah.
Toronto would be well served winning the Atlantic just because they could avoid the Florida Tampa juggernaut in waiting. It's a lot easier to draw someone like Columbus or Detroit than have to go through, Tampa or Florida in the first round.
I mean, to Marner's credit, he's having a good year in this with all this going on, so that's good.
Yeah, we're 10 minutes from the deadline. Things have sort of slowed. I almost get to the point here where they're waiting to announce these deals at like 3:01. I mean, there are sort of deals that are happening, but they just don't get announced.
Traded Henry Yokiharu for future considerations.
Who?
No, I'm saying that's what will happen at 3:01. I'm making it
up. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
He'll go to Columbus for future considerations.
Our good friend Brian Metzer, who will also be contributing to the Hockey Hot Stove, just posted, "We will never forget you," and they had raised a banner of Luke Schen's number 2 into the rafters.
Yeah.
Listen,
Mike Sullivan said great things about him for the 10 minutes he was there.
Yeah, at the PPG.
When did Schenn arrive there? I can't remember.
The trade happened 2 days ago, 3 days
ago? Was it 2 days ago?
Yeah, I think so.
Cody Glass,
Sabres legend.
Yes. Who was the goal? Yeah, that's right. Yaroslav Halak. That's right. Yeah. The Predators gave up, the Devils gave up a 3rd-round pick to the Penguins for Cody Glass. So.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Cody Glass is useful, but not great. But I got to talk about Halak for a minute, though. He gave me the greatest quote when I was writing for NHL.com back in the day. He gave me one of the great quotes of all time because I asked him, what is the big difference now that you're playing in the NHL? And he said, didn't even skip a beat. He goes, the food. The food is so much better. It's just I can't. It was just like that was the first thing he said. And it was just, I can't blame the guy. That was probably the truth.
Yeah. Well, okay, Russ, I wanted to wait for Jan, but Jan, he must be held up on something here. Last night, the most bizarre, this JJ Peterka rumors that were popping up. And it was not like, sources that were undependable.
Right.
I mean, it was, Arthur Staple was saying there's nothing to the JJ Peterka to the Rangers rumors, but I cannot remember who it was that had the original report, but it was somebody substantive, and we're like, oh, what the heck's going on here? And then nothing ever happened. So I got
a lot of texts about it. I did, and the only rationale that I could see from Buffalo's standpoint is Peterka's playing too well and they don't want to pay him. Like, that's the only thing I can come up with, because there's no reason you wouldn't want to keep this guy. And then from the Rangers standpoint is, would they really trade Lafreniere? I don't think they would. So I just, basically, I'm not sure this was ever going to happen. I think maybe Buffalo called and asked, and I think maybe that's how it went, and that's why from that side they heard about it. But I don't think there was ever going to be a trade there. I could be wrong, but that's just my feel.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the thing too with Buffalo, you got to be careful, because how many players actually want to go there? I mean, Buffalo
Correct.
has to build themselves through trades, because they're not getting any free agents, or if they get any free agents, they're going to have to heavily overpay over what they're going to have to pay this summer. So you kind of have to keep a core. But like we were talking about earlier, they have not done a stellar job for the last dozen years of doing that.
Well, the interesting thing, the key thing, I think one of the key factors in the Cousins deal was that Josh Norris is on a deal that's just as long as Cousins. He's got 5 years left at $7.9 million. Cousins had 5 years left at $7.1 million. The Sabres organization, and Peter, this is something that you can sympathize with Winnipeg. I mean, Buffalo and Winnipeg are in similar instances that where they're teams that are on a lot of players' no trade lists. Even though Winnipeg is a successful team, that shouldn't be the case. But I think it's the weather and everything else. The Sabres all year have been saying we want to make hockey deals. That's all we're not. They signed their rentals, but we want to make hockey deals. And why? Because they can't get players to come to Buffalo.
Yeah.
And they can't get players to come to Buffalo because they've missed the playoffs for 14 straight years. Players will come to Buffalo when it's the Bills because they make the playoffs and they have a chance, even though they haven't gotten there. They have a chance to win the Super Bowl. But the Sabres are a different story altogether.
Yeah, and the Sabres are, if the Sabres didn't live in the shadow of the Leafs in terms of geographic proximity and height proximity, they'd probably have a better time, I think, because there's been lots of other teams that didn't have those problems. But I think that just changes a lot of things there. I think that's just reality, but winning changes everything. But man, one thing that when you talk to the people who are around the top of an NHL organization, the one thing they consistently say, and this isn't just GMs, it's, maybe it's owners, maybe it's other executives, is it's really hard to win in this league. Mm-hmm. It's just really hard to be a winner and to do it consistently. And, some teams do, and some teams get lucky, but others don't. And others try to do the right things and they think it all lines up, but then it blows apart. And it takes a real concise, managed organizational culture to build a winning team that can do it consistently. And you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. But when you have downs like the Sabres have, that's your cycle. And, rehiring people who have been through cycles, rehiring the same kind of thinking that got you into the cycle is a wrong way of doing it. You need to bring in new thinking and different ways of doing it. The Leafs attempted it, but they didn't stick with it, right? And owners get impatient, management gets impatient, and things change. But it's hard. I don't know what you do to break that, but I do know, like, as a market that's become undesirable, you have to stick to a plan of getting people there, then selling them on staying. But the problem is, I think there's, to compare Winnipeg and the Sabres again, I think there's a lot of things that go on within the Sabres organization once players are there that are not conducive to them staying and wanting to stay, because they keep messing things up. And there's a long, bad take about it. And honestly, if you can remember, and Anthony and Russ, you'll remember this too. The Flyers had a bit of a problem a number of years ago with their whole training system and team, and they were getting sued and things, and they got a bit of a bad rap, right? There was some confusion about who owned what, who was doing what, and treatment of players and stuff. And it takes a while to break that. Buffalo's 10 times worse than that ever was. And how do you get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, the Mets had that problem too, and they finally got out of it. So, yeah, there's been a lot of teams that have gone through that.
And you don't try to get there, but you fight the reputation.
Well, and the thing is, it's not limited to, markets like Winnipeg and Buffalo. And I'll give you two examples. And I just saw this tweet, and maybe it wasn't specific to Toronto, but Bob McKenzie on the panel on TSN said the Leafs wanted Braden Shen originally, before opting or before switching to Lawton. And he said Shen did not waive his no trade clause. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't want to waive his no trade clause to prevent going to Toronto. He just wants to stay in St. Louis. He's a captain of the team. But, if he thought that they were going through a rebuild, but he didn't waive. So I don't know if you could say that's anti-Toronto or just that he wanted to stay in St. Louis. I do know that Ryan
I think it's pro-toasted ravioli. That's what I think.
There you go. I do know that Ryan O'Reilly, he was traded to Toronto. He had no trade protection back in 23. And he played in the playoffs, and they won a round. They wanted to re-sign him. And he didn't want to stay in Toronto. He got the same offer, actually a little more, from Nashville, and he signed a 4-year deal there. Now, it's not going well in Nashville, and apparently, according to, I think it was Elliot Friedman, said that the Leafs approached Nashville about Ryan O'Reilly, and he doesn't have any no-trade protection, but basically Barry Trotz came out and said he's got a no move with me, meaning that he wasn't going to trade him someplace he didn't want to go. And he was asked whether he would go to Toronto, and he said no. So Toronto is the biggest market hockey-wise in the NHL, and some players don't like that. Some, like William Nylander, don't give a shit. They just live their life, and they don't care. They're not fazed by it. But some players sort of shrink from the attention. And that's the sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. Jan, I wanted to ask you, because we brought up the Peterka rumors from last night, and we brought it up in our group text. I was skeptical from the very beginning because I couldn't figure out, other than like a Lafreniere type of deal where it'd be like a 2-for-2, and I said this would make sense. I don't know if the Rangers would do it, but if it was something like Peterka and Owen Power for Lafreniere and Braden Schneider, where, they're getting a former number 1 overall pick for a former number 1 overall pick. And, I think it's a deal of like shaking up the rosters, that would at least make sense, but I couldn't make any sense of it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the Rangers want Byron more than Power, personally, just because of the way they're kind of constructing their lineup and what they're looking for. I mean, Lafreniere got off to a tremendous start this year, right, and which has landed him the extension, and then ever since then, his game has fallen off the face of the earth. One thing I think they're hoping at is JT Miller has a positive impact on him, just in terms of getting Lafreniere. When he's going well, he's more physical. Kind of saw it a little bit the other night against Washington. Ted, you can say the reverse hit that he put on during that game is kind of something he used to do in the past, has gotten away from. So it would be an interesting deal. First of all, I don't know if the Rangers want to kind of get rid of more quote unquote homegrown guys. They've already dealt a bunch of them in dealing Kakko and dealing Hedel. I'm not quite sure how many more of those guys they want to get rid of based upon the roster construction right now. And then, I mean, Peterka is going to probably get $7 to $8 million. We talked about probably 6-year deal, very fair deal. I know Buffalo, suppose he's been interested in Schneider for a while. I think some Ranger fans have grown sour of him. He hasn't grown like we thought he would after that first playoff run. He's been good, not great, but I personally wouldn't give up on him. I mean, I think a lot of the deals they've made already is probably going to solidify their blue line. I don't know if they're going to do a ton more there. They just extended Vakanainen for 2 more years of $1.55 million. They've already extended Borgen for about 5 years. You got Fox coming back. I mean, the odd man out may end up being Zach Jones. And honestly, Zach Jones has been their best defenseman in the last 3 games. And I can hear the reverberation from last year in the playoffs against Florida with all of us screaming, please, for the love of God, put Zach Jones in the game because at least he can get the puck out of his own zone. And they didn't, and it cost them. And it's something they're using him first-line power play now, which is a good move. I think he should be in the lineup. but with all the new additions, I'm not quite sure how that's going to line up. But he was a good solid add in terms of Akanainen and Susi and those guys. But I mean, there's rumors of big deals coming down the pike, and I think Mike kind of heard one that's coming down, or no?
Elliot Friedman just said last minute possibility. Hearing Brad Marchand could be traded to Florida. My God.
Get your popcorn and watch Brady and Matthew in the locker room. I think we can sell tickets just for that.
Not Brady because he's in Ottawa, but yeah, I get.
Sorry,
Matthew that's where Mike. That's where people go to retire.
Season, so
people go to retire in Florida. It makes sense.
Yes, longboat.
By the way, Scott Powers just tweeted that Ryan Donato is not going anywhere during the deadline, which is what I figured.
This is content for you. Frank Cervelli just reported Joel Armia and David Savard are not going anywhere. So,
which is ridiculous. I just
want to talk about Canadians are buying in, baby.
Okay, I want to just chat about this for a minute because, yes, they're 1 point out, but they're further than that. They don't have the best goaltending. If they think that just being close is going to give this magic wand effect to their players, their younger players. Like, what happened to the rest of the season? Weren't they playing their hardest the rest of the season? I think Cole Caulfield was. He's got 16% of their goals.
No, Caden Primo was responsible for everything. Right. Now that they have Jakob Dovish.
Right.
Everything's coming up rosy.
Yeah, that was a flash. He's okay. He's decent, but that was a flash. But the point is, like, the David Savard thing, like, if they, Mike, I know you said maybe they'll sign him because he's from the area. If they sign him at the age of 34, what message is that sending as far as where the organization's at? Armia, fine. Armia's making too much money, so maybe you couldn't move him. But Savard could have gotten a lot in the market, and I think Hughes is making a mistake. But
it's sending a message that your defense sucks and you have to sign a 34-year-old because he's a right-hand shot and you don't have anybody else to play the right side.
We have a potential development here. Elliot Friedman saying one last-minute possibility.
Yeah.
Hearing Brad
Marchand. We know.
Gotcha. No, it's fine. The other thing is, though, Mike, I had mentioned in a Hockey News article that if I were the Canadians, I would have picked up Riley Stillman, who's, I think, a decent NHL defenseman. It's just Carolina had no space for the guy, and who knows? We'll find out tomorrow if he got claimed by anybody. But Stillman's played, I think, 159 NHL games. He's not bad.
And Buffalo had no place for him either, Russ. I didn't think he was that bad. He was physical.
He's not. He's physical. He could skate a little bit. I think he's useful.
Yeah, I mean, we know that there will be some deals that'll trickle in.
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's the Lou Lamoriello. It's only 12 noon in Lou Lamoriello land.
Yeah, but he can't use the fax machine excuse anymore. It doesn't work.
No,
he still will.
I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. I mean, we could be surprised. There was a lot of chatter the last 48 to 72 hours that Dubas was working hard at trying to trade Erik Karlsson. I mean, good luck.
That's the impossible dream right there.
I mean, I think you would have to Ted's muted, sorry. I'll go to Peter first.
Go to Peter. He'll mute himself too.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
No, I'll go to Ted for it.
It really is turning into Hollywood Squares here.
Center Square, Paul
block, please.
Oh God. No, what I was saying is Dubas trying hard to trade Erik Karlsson. I think he would have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in like the Mr. World contest to be able to move that one. Because you know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, it's a $10.5 million contract. He'd have to eat half of it.
Sorry to interrupt, but per LeBron, it pretty much looks like it's a done deal pending league call. Marchand heading to Florida.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Which means Matthew Tkachuk just goes on long-term IR.
Exactly. They just pulled this. As we said, as I tweeted before, Mr. Zito, are we ready to enact the Vegas protocol? Yes.
And until they change the CBA for the playoffs, where the active playoff roster has to be capped behind, it's never going to change.
They're never going to do it.
I am going to be fascinated by this return, though. I am genuinely fascinated by this return.
I'll bet you it's a 2028 first-round pick or something like that.
Yeah, but the interesting part is on the flip side. Marchand was pretty expressive that he wanted to stay in Boston. He was pretty much out there that he didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to stay there. That could signal I can't see him coming back after this.
Brian Leach
after this year now.
This is like a Brian Leach situation.
Mhm.
No,
That's what this is like, Jan.
Yeah.
Jan, this. Yeah, I mean, Leach is a good comparison.
Well, he's going to get traded on his birthday, Russ.
That's true.
No, I had another. Go ahead. I had
I was going to say
another.
it's a perfect situation. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say it's a perfect situation for Marchand because Florida doesn't need him until the playoffs. They can afford to wait and until he gets healthy. Plus, he gets to stay on IR, so we won't accumulate anything on the cap anyway. Even though they have plenty of room for him, but he can step in, and if they don't pay a lot for him, it's probably going to be a very conditional deal, depending on how many games he actually plays or how far they go. It's probably one of those things. Why not take a shot?
And licking is legal.
The Atlantic is nuts. The Atlantic
licking is legal in
Florida.
Florida.
Both insane right now.
Yeah, Atlantic is scary.
Yeah, the licking is legal in Florida. But well, I mean, yeah.
It's in the Washington
Capitals.
Capitals.
Florida,
right, anyhow.
The Florida Tampa series is going to be absolute murder. Those two teams going at it.
If it's Florida Tampa, but the problem is now Florida's in first place. It's only 2 points, and Toronto's got a game in hand. But Toronto, the last few games, they really didn't show up against Vegas. They lost to They lost in a shootout to San Jose. So, and they were lucky to win again in Pittsburgh. So they haven't played well lately. They can't afford a stretch that they play badly. Otherwise, they'll end up in second or third, and then they play Tampa or they play Florida, and I think they'll lose one of those. If they finish in first place in the Atlantic, then they have an opportunity. Especially with a weakened Florida or Tampa team coming out of that. If the Toronto game is the same night as Florida Tampa, I may tape the Toronto game and watch Florida Tampa because it's going to be a friggin' war. It will be.
Yep.
There's Anna. See,
That's Anna's war cry for the series.
Anna's breaking a trade.
She's made an appearance.
It's an A5, Russ, right?
Yeah, well, I said she was holding out because Hockey Hot Stove didn't officially ask her to be on the show, but it's fine.
She's our spokes cat.
Spokes cat.
So I would have. Well, okay. With Marchand here, this is what this is. This is Boston's version of Stamkos, but they didn't trade Stamkos. They let Stamkos walk away in free agency.
Whoa, the Leafs are getting Brandon Carlo, according to Chris Johnson.
There you go. There's your right shot defense.
Boston is in full-on fire sale.
There is your
the exodus from Beantown.
In this deal, they're more than likely giving up. I'll bet you they're giving up their 2027 first and maybe Easton Collins.
This is giving one of their top prospects.
Yeah, if you're getting Carlo, and Carlo has got, I think he's got 3 years left at 4.1. I mean, he's got term on his contract. I'm just checking.
Carlo can play. He's good.
Yeah, no, and let's see what Carlo's got 2 more years at 4.1.
Is anybody sad to see the Bruins break up? I'm just asking.
No one's crying. No one.
Certainly nobody in Vancouver, nobody in Toronto, nobody in Montreal.
Holy moly.
You name it.
How are Boston fans going to take Marchand going to play for the Panthers? I mean, yes, he was traded there, but come on, that's like trading someone to the Yankees for the for the playoffs.
Well, hey, Alex Verdugo, there you go. Goodness. Oh, so the Leafs got Carlo. Okay, let's make some predictions. I think they're giving up. I think they're giving up Easton Cowan, and I think they're giving up another number one, probably their 27.
Not Fraser Minton.
No, because I think Fraser.
No, I know. He's the future third line center in Toronto.
Yeah, I think it's what Mike said.
It would probably be Cowan because again, you're looking for an eventual long-term offensive replacement for if we're losing a Marchand in this case. So I would be expecting Easton Cowan's probably in this trade.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, clearly, Don Sweeney, so Don Sweeney has traded Trent Frederick. He's traded Brad Marchand. He's traded Charlie Coyle for Casey Middlestat, and now he's traded Brandon Carlo. And we don't know what the return is yet, but we'll see it. We'll see it eventually. Yeah, Brandon Carlo to Toronto. Everybody's reporting it. A friend is telling me he's an average defenseman, nothing more than that.
Stop it. Don't people stop it. They just
Carlo is a high
big,
level
tough
move.
Righty. And that
plays a lot of minutes too.
Yes. I mean now sorry folks, it's Leaf Talk here on AM 640.
I can go on mute now. I can go asleep.
He'd look great on the Jets too. Sad.
You got Luke Shen. There you go.
Yeah.
But now your top four is any combination of Chris Tanev, Brandon Carlo, Jake McCabe, and Morgan Riley. And probably you're going to end up having McCabe and Tanev because they've been the shutdown pairing, and you're going to have Carlo playing with Morgan Riley. And I mean, that's a solid.
It's time, Michael. It's time. It's time. It's time for that Leafs run.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Well, this is the one way they could get past Boston. They just took one of their best players.
Can't beat them. Get them.
Yeah.
I think it would have been better if it would have been Marchand. Imagine a package though. Can you imagine if it would have been Marchand and Carlo in a package? Oh my God! Everybody's collective brain matter would have exploded.
But he traded inside his own. What's going on here in the Atlantic? Ottawa and Buffalo trading with each other. Boston and Toronto. Boston and Florida. It's like
they're just going for value.
That's truly, Ted. That's what they're doing. They're going for who they don't care about the division. I mean, Brian Burke did this 15 years ago. You cared about what the division was because you had to face Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton in Boston because you traded for Phil Kessel and gave up the 2nd overall and the 10th overall pick in the draft. Thank you, Brian Burke.
It was like the Drew Bledsoe trade. You don't trade unless in the division. Unless you think the guy can beat you.
Don't bring up bad memories here.
That's like at least Bledsoe was able to rent out his house, though, right?
That's like bringing up to these guys, Aaron Rodgers.
Why would we do that?
Why would we?
Well, he brought up Drew Bledsoe.
I know.
I said that would be like
I know, but Ted didn't bring up Rodgers. You did, Mike.
Russ, I said that would be like you bringing up Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Ted is a Bills fan.
I know what Ted is. Don't worry. I have a good idea. I have a good idea what Ted is.
Ted, are you a bit surprised the Caps didn't do more at the deadline?
We're bringing Chris Ross. We're bringing Chris Wassel onto the program, and he also will be joining Hockey Hot Stove in a capacity coming up next month. And Chris, we just had the Brandon Carlo announcement on top of the Brad Marchand announcement, and I'm stunned. I mentioned Brandon Carlo as if the Leafs were going to give up one of their top prospects. This is a guy because he had term that I would do it because he has 2 years left at $4.1 million, and he's a good, tough right shot defenseman with playoff experience. I don't know if the Leafs gave up, but I think. Barring even if they gave up one of their top prospects, it's a great ad.
Yeah, he's a minute chugger. He's a great ad, and finally Toronto figures out the concept that Shorty said this from Blackstreet. You got to pay to play, and in this market, it was nuts. You could see like the writing on the wall. The final 5-6 days of the trade deadline, you're starting to see prices. You're starting to see the rumors come in. The volume of horse crap that I may have seen over the last 48 hours alone probably dwarfs what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 trade deadlines.
Yeah.
but it's the sorting through it. And then what came through about maybe yesterday was the Marchand rumors. Basically Florida, Vegas, and Colorado being in the mix. And this was concrete. I mean, this was not something that somebody like drew out of the air or did a certain rumor generator and had fun with it. It was a legit rumor. Once Colorado kind of made their moves and fell off a little bit, it was between Vegas and Florida. And of course, when everybody sees the Vegas account on X simply waving and saying, hi, they immediately panic, and rightfully so, because the last 2 years they've kind of done that and then announced the trade right around 3:00. For once, Vegas really didn't have that many stokes in the fire. They didn't have my grill ready to go, I guess.
Well, they've run out of prospects too. They have one prospect left, Trevor Connolly. So that's it.
What did somebody tell me that it was an old reference, so I kind of laughed at it. It's like Logan's Run in Vegas. None of the draft picks play past 24.
Yeah, Stephen Ellis posted it. Like Connolly's their only first rounder left.
At first, I thought when Stephen posted it, I will be honest, I thought it was a joke. And then obviously you sit there, you start going, wait, no. Oh dear God, they really are the Running Man version of Logan's Run, at least for draft picks. I mean, of course, now everybody's going to ask the inevitable question: which team will have a first round draft pick next decade, maybe? Since Florida isn't going to have one for a couple of years.
First of all, we have added Matthew Blittner to the show. Unfortunately, I didn't know this, and the StreamYard room is limited to 6. And used to be more. I don't know why.
We have an additional trade.
Yeah, get this one. I'm going to announce this one, Russ, because this is bizarre.
Yeah, if the Flyers are trading Eric Johnson back to the Colorado Avalanche.
There you go. I said that one a couple days ago.
Getting some detail on that, on what the return is. But I did hear something that was a possibility. I mean, Johnson's been kind of sitting and not really playing much, and I'm sure he wanted to get another opportunity here to play. So, but yeah, we're waiting on the return. But yeah, it looks like Johnson. The Flyers are sending Johnson in this case. By the way, it looks like Fraser Minton is the one that's going to be in the deal for Brandon Carlo. Is what it sounds like.
Damn it!
So Minton was going somehow in some way in this.
It was Minton or Cowan.
They did good. Yeah,
Minton in this case. So yeah.
But I wonder if it's Minton in the number 1 or just.
Hang on.
Actually, we're seeing a player maybe coming back for Johnson, so we're waiting on the word on this.
Hang on.
Listen
Chicago has trade.
Peter, let me do it for dramatic effect. Because we've had a future Hall of Famer traded. Shea Weber has been traded.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, his contract.
Shea Weber, Aku Ratu, and Victor Soderstrom, who was a rather high first-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes, who went. I think he went back to the SHL because they screwed him and put him in the AHL, and so they were traded to Chicago for a 2026 6th-round pick. So they needed Shea Weber's cap hit to get to the cap floor next year.
That's what they're doing.
Wow, boy.
Listen, Ratu's still a pretty good prospect, so that's not bad.
So is it just Fraser Minton, or have we seen anything else?
Wait for it.
Yeah.
Mike, since we have Chris and Matthew here, why don't we let them talk Devils for a minute?
Yeah,
they only deserve a minute, but no, I'm kidding.
It's more like a commercial break. There wasn't much. I didn't think there would be, to be honest.
Well, but we said this before. So Jack Hughes goes down, unfortunately, because that sucks, because he's a great player. Dougie Hamilton is out week to week, and Tom Fitzgerald replaces them with Cody Glass and Brian Dumoulin. Discuss.
Matt, why don't you go first since you can't see us? Go ahead.
All right. So can you just repeat the thing, because you were going in and out a little bit right there?
Okay. Hughes is out for the year. Dougie Hamilton is out week to week. And the moves made by Tom Fitzgerald were to acquire Cody Glass for a third-round pick from Pittsburgh and Brian Dumoulin from Anaheim for a second-round pick.
Yeah, so as I said, I think I said this on Twitter, yesterday. Getting Dumoulin is actually I don't want to say it's a savvy move, but it is actually smart to. Their defense has been very good this year, the Devils. They rank in the top 5 in terms of fewest goals allowed. Yes, they can't score, but we'll get to that in a second. They, when you have such a strength like that, it's not like they were 12th in the league in, middle of the pack in terms of allowing goals. They're in the top 5 in terms of fewest goals allowed. So for that, why not add your strength and add to your strength even more? Yeah, Dumoulin, maybe at best a second pair for them. They did lots of Jonathan Tovacevic today, so maybe he's a third pair, but the more defensive depth, the better. They're not going to go back to the trap system from 30 years ago, but they're just going to continue to make it very difficult for the opponents to score. As for them not being able to score, okay, yes, Cody Glass is not an answer on that. But, if Nico Hischier is moving up to the number 1 line, where he had normally been the second line center behind Jack Hughes, then, you're losing a lot of depth right there. Dawson Mercer has shown he's not really a true center as much as they like to bounce him back and forth between center and wing when they need it. So, I don't hate the move of Cody Glass in terms of giving them depth. I mean, they were able to score from the top 6. That was the only place they could score this year. They just couldn't get any bottom 6 scoring. Will Glass be the answer to that? No, but maybe, maybe they won't have to score 4 goals a game to win. Jacob Markstrom's back. Dumoulin will help shore up the defense even more so. And, instead of having to win a game 4-3, maybe they can win the game like 2-1.
Okay, Darren Drager is reporting that there's a bad echo here. Hold on. I think it might be Matthew. Let me just mute you for a second. Yeah, it's just an echo. I'm going to mute you for a second, Matt. Darren Drager reports that if it happens, I guess that means that they got the trade call in time. Henry Jokiharju is going to the Bruins. So, which doesn't make any sense because he's a rental. So are they trying to buy and sell at the same time? They're selling a lot more than they're buying.
They might extend them. I mean, they need a little help on the blue line. I mean, they might extend them.
Yeah, I think it may be just a number. It could be a numbers game here of having just a passable NHL defense for the season.
Yeah, that too.
They're not necessarily looking to complete while they're having a fire, so it doesn't mean they're going to attempt to completely crash out.
Yeah, I mean,
update again. I think, and I mentioned this in the chat earlier. It sounds like for Johnson, the report is it sounds like it's going to be Johnny Smith coming from Colorado.
Yeah, he's a little
27, 28 years old. We know him. It's a roster option.
Now, is Dan right?
I'm a little surprised at this one because I've seen him play with the Sharks, and I think he's a pretty decent player. Fabian Zetterlund traded to the Ottawa Senators for Zach Ostapchuk.
Yeah. Actually, this is a great trade for Ottawa because I think Zetterlund was having contract issues. I know San Jose was talking about extending him and couldn't seem to get it done. I was told, I can't remember who mentioned that to me. And so, I think that's the problem there. And so, at least San Jose got value in return. That's a pretty good player, but Ottawa got a really good player now. Like this could really help them.
See, now and we'll stay in the line, stay on for another 10 minutes because then Russ and
I'm gonna go anyhow. I'll see you guys.
Okay. So Russ is checking out. What's that?
I said we're almost at the 2-hour mark. We're getting
I know, right?
I've almost drunk a full 2 liter of Schweppes ginger ale.
I've already changed position 3 times on this show.
Yeah, wow. What are you like? What are you like?
Anthony's just like he's now crossed state borders. He's a fugitive.
What is
jeez.
I'll be up in Canada if you guys will have me.
Like a Melda Marcos changing shoes or something? What the hell?
Hey, that sounds like me in the old days, like crossing New Jersey into Pennsylvania to make certain bets that you could only do for Bet US.
Yeah.
So the angst in Winnipeg is starting to come out.
Because they didn't make as big a move.
Yeah,
as,
you know, you've got people saying, well, they left 6 point something million on the table in cap room and blah blah blah. You know, it's a really funny thing about sports and even media people, because most of the media people tweeting are never going to touch $6 million in assets in their combined lifetimes, let alone know what to do with it if they ever owned it. But the funny thing about this is the Jets play in the smallest NHL market. They get the most money out of the NHL revenue sharing. They have the smallest arena. They have the least corporate sponsorship. They're not selling out, and they're first in the league. But they should do more. They should totally do more, right? What do you expect them to do? And that's the funny thing, is that at a certain point, is if it's illogical, or if it's logical for the Jets to do illogical spending, or any other NHL team, please do that and buy their tickets as well. Go buy the merch as well. Like, max out your credit cards, run up a line of credit, and buy those season tickets at the same time, because that's what you're asking an ownership group to do. And it doesn't matter that David Thompson is the 35th richest person in the world. He has a fractional ownership in the real estate of the team. That's it. And it's always been that way. And I think for many teams, you got to think about the same thing. You know, Dolan's going to go into bankruptcy because he built a $2 billion ball in Vegas. And, you know, all these different things happen. They like to make money, guys. And the sad part is it sucks to be the small kid on the block, but appreciate what you have. And I think a lot of teams and fans should take that point. You can't hit every home run. You hit a home run every day. At the trade deadline, it comes around. Even if you're in a sort of a once in a franchise moment of leading the league and having things, you also have to remember, no one wants to fricking come to Winnipeg.
Right.
Like, how do you convince people to do it? What's that, Anthony? You come? That's the point. And I just think there's a lot of messages around that get lost, and a lot of misunderstanding, because people are thinking with their passion. And yeah, you should be passionate. You should want the team to do well and do things that give you hope. But hope is never a plan, and fans are addicted to hopium. And if you want that, go move to Vegas, because it's the perfect place to gamble with everything. And yes, Vegas finally has some success, but they're going to pay a price. It always comes around.
Oh, all these teams are going to pay a price eventually. Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh. What's going on in Pittsburgh right now is the cautionary tale for Florida and Tampa Bay and Vegas.
Yeah, you could also turn around and make the argument again. You have to when you have a certain core, you have to maximize that window.
Yeah. Now
that's the trade-off.
Now we're gonna end the show in a couple minutes here, because when Anthony drops off, we'll just end. But I just need to post this, and Ted Starkey let me know that this was tweeted, and I really hate when politicians on either side of the political aisle get involved in sports. Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, bad turnover, Mikko, referring to Mikko Rantanen. You would have loved it here, but you didn't give North Carolina a chance. On the bright side, at the Canes, we're getting for the playoffs what they got these last 13 games. Then it's for the best. Now it's time for a Carolina Cup run.
Okay.
Stay in your own.
He's a Carolina fit. What do you want?
Stay in your own friggin' lane.
Okay, he's a Carolina fan, but he has to remember something. Their only glory came from Eric Stahl high-sticking Saku Koivu. And literally every round after that was some catastrophic injury to the team they played. Yeah. Because Devils had like 2-3 freak injuries the next round.
The entire
the Pittsburgh series, Buffalo, Jay McKee with the freaking.
Oh, not just Jay McKee, their entire defense. Okay. Jay McKee.
Mush. Stuff happens. It's the playoff.
What was it? Game one of the Stanley Cup final. Pisani gets hurt, and then I can't remember the goalie now.
It was
because they kept having to switch goalies because of injuries. And
first it was Rollis, and then it was Ty Conklin, then it was UC Markkinen.
Markkinen. I think it was Markkinen that wound up like having his leg stepped on in the crease of all things. I mean, it was like just one of the most bizarre playoff runs that.
Yeah.
I had it to the point where I think it was Lyle Richardson at the time, and I can't even remember what. I think he was just starting out with Specters, and he says this to me, and I'm like, look, Lyle, I'm in California. I really don't know what's going on. And he's like, watch, there's going to be another catastrophic injury that helps Carolina. And I'm like, what do you mean? And sure enough, it just was something that just kept happening.
Yeah. So just to confirm what Anthony said before we drop off the air here, Fraser Minton is part of the package going to Boston for in the Brandon Carlo deal. Also possibly connected. There was a report that Connor Timmins had left practice.
Yeah.
So he might be part of the deal as well, because they probably had to open up the cap space to because Carlo's salary was, I seriously doubt Boston is eating salary. It's $4.1 million, and Timmins makes like $1.1 million. He was bottom pairing. So, but like I said, I think Toronto's defense, now that you've added Carlo, is significantly better with.
Yeah, I think that's as good as good a trade deadline acquisition on the blue line as you could have possibly made. I think for Toronto, that was absolutely. We talked about Ristolainen, but again, that wasn't going to necessarily happen in this circumstance. Carlo has got has a championship resume, and again, these were the moves that needed to be made. We could talk about obviously Lawton in this circumstance. I think Lawton's versatility, will certainly help Toronto in the playoffs. Obviously, they'll play him at center, but he can fit in a lot of other different ways. All things considered, I think the Leafs did pretty good here at the deadline, Mike.
And you have to factor in, the Marchand move is a big splashy move, but you have to remember Marchand may not be ready to play for another 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not a move that's going to help Florida immediately, and they're without Tkachuk. And I think after the Seth Jones deal, I don't think they can activate Tkachuk until the playoffs because of the cap space. So, that's going to be a factor with Florida, and I mean, we'll see. But I think all the teams in the Atlantic improve themselves. I mean, the top 3 teams in the Atlantic improve themselves. I don't know about Ottawa. They're in a race for the playoffs. And Detroit, did Detroit do anything other than add Peter Mrazek and Craig Smith? That's it.
At the moment, unless something else is reported here, I don't think so.
I don't see anything else.
Yeah.
You got to believe in the Yzer plan.
The Yzer plan.
3 goalies, and they have literally one of the historically worst penalty kills in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
There's literally, real quick, guys, there's literally 4 teams this year that are among the top 10 worst penalty kills of the decade this year. So if you're wondering why power play goals are up, look at teams like Detroit, some team, just that literally just doesn't have a clue. And that's why a team like New Jersey can stay in it, even though it's only their special teams.
All right, guys. Great. Thank you for joining. Thank everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe off the post. We will have more news about the new website, Hockey Hot Stove, in the coming days. We plan on launching hopefully right before the playoffs. So please go to hockeyhotstove.com and follow me at Mike and Buffalo. And as you see, Chris and Peter there have their Twitter handles or X handles or Blue Sky handles. Thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you again real soon.